The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Paranormal Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only. I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of? Philadelphia's horror home with hosts T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
Welcome back to What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal shows. This is T. Fox Dunham.
And this is Phil Thomas.
It feels like we just recorded a few days ago, doesn't it?
It feels like it. Did we? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, we start playing these episodes and time gets relative and we're traveling close to black holes, so, you've got the time dilation effect. And actually, no, it was Tuesday, wasn't it? 2 days
Yes, it was. Yes. It was a few days ago, yeah.
Miss Melissa George was going to be on, but then she had some rain, and of course it's a weird time in the world, so she should be on in 2 weeks with her paranormal writings. I love her. She's just such a wonderful lady.
Yes, she's great. She's great. And we did that show. We had her scheduled, like you were saying, but we ended up, we decided to do one anyway.
Yeah. We had Keith Linder on beforehand, and Keith was incredible with his tales of the poltergeists in Bothell.
I had a hard time getting to sleep that night.
Good.
I must say.
Yes, exactly. If you can't sleep the next night, our guests did their job. We are What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal show on Paranormal Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can check us out on most major podcast services. In fact, I'm always trying to find new ones to add. I'm in a negotiation with a public radio out in California, and looks like we're going to go through there, which would be a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. That'd be wonderful.
We're also, like I said, Paranormal Radio, Friday nights at 9 p.m. And check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com for a page on every episode, written interviews, written articles, and our archive of narrated ghost stories over there, plus links to our guests. And we have a lot of written content showing up at the website, articles, interviews, book reviews, blog entries. And it's getting a lot of attention right now, especially with Katrina Weidman returning with her show. Thank you, Katrina, for everything you've done for us. But this is episode 139, Greg Bear, Darwin's author. Over here in Lancaster County, we are now under a stay-at-home lockdown order.
Yes, so am I.
Yeah,
I am Montgomery County, and we are under a stay-at-home lockdown as well.
Right.
I have not been out of the house in I've been out of the house, but it's been weeks since I've actually gone out.
Right.
I've been outside. I sat out back, stuff like that, but I didn't actually go to the store or anything in a very long time. Getting things delivered. I know you guys. I don't know how you guys are doing it, but I'm just doing my shopping orders online.
That's not a bad idea. For our audience, I'm not sure when this will premiere in 2 weeks, and hopefully maybe things have calmed down by then and they've let go of some of the security measures, even though from the sounds of those doctors who are actually intelligent, we may be doing this for another month or two or even more time depending on how this virus grows. So maybe our audience in 2 weeks will be sitting there listening to the show and they'll still be under a lockdown order. Allison's been going to the store. She went to the store this morning. I'm not allowed out of the house. My oncologists have locked me down. They've tied me to the mast. They've hid me under the bed. They've buried me behind a wall like Fortunato in Montresa. For the love of God, my oncologists, yes, for the love of God.
I love it.
Here's your medical bill.
So you got your medical bill.
Yeah. So with a third of a normal immune system, plus all the radiation scar tissue and the chronic pneumonia in my lungs, if I get this thing, then we will be hosting the show from the other side.
Yeah, and you're better off just not going out.
Yeah.
Just don't go anywhere. And like you said, who knows how long this thing's actually going to last?
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, the experts, the intelligent people who actually are expert in this area are saying it could be a very long time. And I don't know if you heard about Seattle, but their curve is actually starting to flatten a little bit.
Good.
A little bit. It's small progress.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the numbers they were doubling in cases every 2 days, and now now the cases are doubling every 5 days.
Okay,
which is still not good, but it's lessening. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they were the first. They were ground zero in the United States. They're the first one to have a positive case that we know about. Yeah.
That's good news. But like I said, Allison's been going out now. I wanted to jump in here real quick because yesterday, now we've just been getting this premonition oh God, we need quarters for the pay washer machine. If we don't get quarters, then the banks are going to close. So the one day she ran out and got $30 worth of quarters, and that night PNC shut their doors. You can't get quarters anymore. And yesterday, I had this feeling like we needed to get some liquor. You just do. Self-medication. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's part of the regimen. So the liquor stores are closed in PA. For anybody who doesn't live in PA, our stores are controlled by the state. So they shut a week ago. We've been able to get beer and wine from the supermarket, but we didn't really have any hard liquor. We didn't prepare for it. So you were telling me about the place in Lansdale.
Right.
They
deliver, and they have curbside pickup.
Right. And so I thought maybe I'll check. And you said it's not the breweries, it's the distilleries that I want to look for.
Yeah, correct. Because breweries, they just do beer. They don't make the liquor. So if you want liquor, you got to go through a distillery. And
I thought look up a distillery around me.
Right.
So I found one called Stoll and Wolfe that is delivering only in these few days. There's another one, but that was over the weekend. I was worried it was going to be too late. And yes, we did. We paid a little bit more, but we got 2 things of whiskey and 1 thing of vodka. And on the show right now, I have in my hand whiskey and soda. I don't usually drink on the show, but I told them that if they let Allison come up and get it right away, that I would put it on the show. So I'm going to have my first taste of Stoll and Wolfe Distillery. Here we go.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh, that is the smoothest. God. And it's 100% proof, but there's barely tastes like alcohol. It's just got that light. Oh my God. Lovely. Let me try a commercial here. Stoll and Wolfe Distillery. On What Are You Afraid Of? We talk about spirits, fine spirits, but they make fine spirits. At Stoll and Wolfe Distillery. www.stollandwolfe, E with an E at the end, .com. Thank you so much, Stoll and Wolfe Distillery.
That's great. So it's 100 proof, huh?
It's 100 proof. I put a little bit in. That's all the proof I need that they're good. God, what a sweet smell of mash.
It's 100 different proofs. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, but we are What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Paperbacks Radio Friday nights. This is episode 139. Greg Bear, Darwin's author. Now we're going to pause for a minute to play a ghost story. One that I wrote up. It's about the Logan Inn. I'm sure you've been there. It's a restaurant in New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
It's right on the corner there. It's got a cannon as a statue in front of it, like when you walk down New Hope, and it's a wonderful restaurant. It was opened by the head housekeeper and head steward of William Penn, who of course owned Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's named for William Penn. And they went and formed this business, and it's an incredible inn, incredible food, and they have their share of ghost stories. Special guests at the Logan Inn, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Researched and written by T. Fox Dunham. We'll be right back on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Paperbacks Radio. Check out our website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com. And we will return after this ghost story with incredible author Greg Bear.
This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America's Paranormal Lockdown, and you're listening to What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show.
Spectral guests at the Logan Inn, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Researched and written and read by T. Fox Dunham. I was blessed to have grown up in bucolic Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And of course, at one time, if you live there, you must visit the old artist colony of New Hope on the Delaware River. Originally called Coral's Ferry, it served as the halfway point for travelers traveling down the Old York Road from New York City to Philadelphia. It is located adjacent to Washington's Crossing, where one summer I worked. George Washington spent the night with his troops here at the inn before making the famous Delaware crossing, taking Trenton on Christmas Day. The site was renamed New Hope after several mills burned down, and it was rebuilt. The site is one of the oldest coach inns in town. An iconic building at the corner of Main Street and Ferry, the building was established in 1727 as the Ferry Tavern, a lodging house providing beds for travelers crossing the Delaware, and was renamed as Logan House by Abraham D. Myers after the current Secretary of State James Logan, or perhaps to honor a local Lenape chief who took Logan's name. In 1969, business associates Arthur Sanders and Carl F. Lutz, a former mayor of New Hope, bought the property. This is Bucks County's oldest run inn, and it's on the register of historical places. It's been decorated to the theme of the Revolutionary War, and it holds 16 rooms available to guests. The restaurant is also a favorite of the author of this story. The duck is delicious and tender. Over the decades, guests and staff at the Logan Inn reported contact with various spirits, though a few of the ghosts stand out as frequently witnessed. The first are the child spirits of the inn. Just after the Second World War, in 1946, during a street fair held in the parking lot, a psychic named Parker Den read the palms of several clients at a small booth. While he busied himself measuring the life of a client's line along the base of his thumb, the blood-curdling scream of a child shocked him from his palmistry. Parker's client also heard the inconsolable sobbing of a young woman coming from the area, and they searched for a hurt little boy or girl inside and around the building. None could be found. In fact, no children were recorded as staying at the inn, nor had any staff seen a child. Unnerved, the psychic closed up his tent and went for an ale to calm himself down. Parker convinced himself that they had imagined the event, and he went back to the next day to ply his trade. At the same time in the afternoon, screaming and sobbing disturbed his reading. They searched but could find no sign of a child. This happened like clockwork every day of the fair. Over the following years, other children appeared to guests. The inn transformed into a cynosure of spiritual activity, or even a window, a conduit into the spiritual world, allowing guests a vision to the other side. The Delaware Canal system served as a highway for coal barges transporting cargo east and west across North America. In the late 1800s, a girl fell from a bridge into the canal that runs behind the parking lot and drowned. Another child has been seen running the halls of the inn, and guests have reported seeing a child's reflection in a mirror hanging in the main hall, though no child was with them. 2 more ghosts have been reported appearing in the mirror hanging in the infamous Room 6. Is this the screaming child heard by the palmists during the street fair? Or is there more than one child's ghost haunting the building? When a child meets an early demise, especially under a tragic circumstance, it often leads to the most violent of haunting. In this case, the child screams perhaps for her mother, a mother who will never come. Though spirits have been seen in a number of places in the inn, room number 6 holds the most haunted reputation. Room 6 is where the mother of the previous owner, Carl Lutz, spent the last months of her life. Emily was believed to be her name, and this room is named after her, Emily's room. The ghost of Emily often appears to guests staying in the room. In addition to the visual apparitions, visitors say they can also smell the herbal scent of lavender, which was Emily's favorite flower. She was known to love the scent and filled the room with vases of the herb grown in the gardens outside the building. A painted portrait of an anonymous couple that used to hang in the room and now hangs in the lobby also smells of lavender from time to time. In addition to these sights and scents, the ghosts also take physical actions against the occupants. Pillows are ripped from under their heads or smacked against their faces while trying to sleep. Objects go missing and are found in empty rooms on the property. Room 6 operates as a focal point of the paranormal activity of the place. A woman complained of a creepy old man standing behind her while she was in the bathroom. When she turned to accost the figure, its image vanished from the reflection. She didn't feel comfortable staying in the room that night. A man traveling on business slept in room 6 and was awoken by a heavy weight pressing on his chest. When he freed himself, he witnessed a hoary and misty shape wafting through the room. He quickly packed and left for the night. Others have reported seeing translucent spirits of children running through the room or appearing in the mirror's reflection. Guests from Weird Pennsylvania magazine report seeing a handprint on the wall with long spindly fingers and catching the sound of a woman sighing on the tape at the moment they discovered the handprint. Is this the spirit of the owner's mother? Others say that the spirit is of the previous owner who haunts the room after losing the inn due to bankruptcy. We'll probably never know for sure. Besides these spirits, guests and visitors have reported ghosts dressed in the uniform of American Revolutionary troops who still march on the grounds, probably left over from Washington's troops before they attacked Trenton that Christmas morning. Soldiers often appear in the cellar, coming up and down the stairs wearing heavy boots. Some believe that the body of a dead soldier was interred in the cellar because he could not be buried in the frozen ground in winter. The body was then transferred to a long-term grave after the thaw. Bottles sometimes crash to the floor, and figures can be seen moving in the pale light. Soldiers wearing uniforms of different eras have also appeared in nearly all of the guest rooms. The author of this story, T. Fox Dunham, has had his own paranormal encounters at the Logan Inn. As he'd written, New Hope was a favorite haunt of his, and he'd go often for dinner or a drink at the Logan. While enjoying a glass of white wine, he asked the server if they'd seen any ghosts haunting the building. The waitress talked about seeing the spectral image of an older woman moving down the hall and vanishing into room number 6 when the building was empty on a snowy night. It was early that weekday, and Fox wanted the necessary to relieve himself of his second glass of wine. He walked out of the bathroom, and there he saw a shadow coming down the stairs, moving down to the first floor. He heard the steps, the sound of groaning boards beneath the body's weight, but a person never appeared. The steps stopped halfway down and didn't resume. While researching the story, he confirmed that others had witnessed the same apparition on the stairs. A previous owner in October 1990 told a reporter for the Doylestown Intelligencer that 1 of 8 ghosts can appear at any time to guests. He said the staff has reported shadows passing them down the hall, objects appearing in other rooms, and even cabinets that lock and unlock without a hand touching them. If you visit southeastern Pennsylvania, you must visit the beautiful city of New Hope built along the Delaware. You might come to see the ghosts, especially in autumn, but stay for the wonderful drink and amazing food.
Illuminating the paranormal. Opening your mind to the possibility. We'll talk about all things metaphysical, paranormal, and everything in between. Illuminating the Paranormal, Tuesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Parax.
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head, the sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet melt. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. And we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
Hey Phil, we're back.
We are back. That was wonderful, and kudos for the research.
We have a lot of people sending in ghost stories, but sometimes they don't work with the show, or I'm saving them for a particular theme. And if you're listening out there, we always need ghost stories.
Absolutely. Have you ever eaten there?
Oh yes, many times. They have a filet mignon that's amazing, and it's just such incredible.
They have some really good stuff.
They do, yeah. And it's just, New Hope is so beautiful, especially the coming time of year. And I hope this play ends soon, so we can get out there and be on the Delaware River and go get brunch and go explore the ghosts. You know, they have.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when we were talking about the Logan Inn just a few minutes ago. Where I was like, man, because it's such a nice day today, and it's like we can't go anywhere.
But here we are on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. This is episode 139. Greg Bear, Darwin's author. Now, this is a very special moment for me. I was so excited that he replied. And, I take a lot of shots with different things. And, you take a shot with some successful authors, well-known authors, film directors, movie stars, and you take 5, and if 1 out of 5 replies and comes on the show, that's 1 out of 5. That's still 1. And then you sort of build up from there. And we've had some great guests on the show, like Joe Lansdale, like Lloyd Kaufman, wonderful authors and filmmakers, and the various guests that were on from, say, Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, like Katrina Weidman. And she's just incredible, doing very well on her new show. Now, Greg, I read Darwin's Radio when I was younger, and then I read Darwin's Children had come out after that. And I was just so impressed by this book, and it was so touching, and so intense, and so brilliant. And he's a brilliant mind. Beyond being a writer, he's a scientific mind who's contributed a lot to our scientific revolution. Now, Greg Bear, science fiction author Greg Bear, was born in San Diego, California, on August 20th, 1951, to Wilma and Dale Bear. His father was in the Navy, and by the time he was 12 years old, Greg had traveled with his parents to Japan, the Philippines, and Alaska, as well as touring various parts of the United States. At 10, while living in Alaska, he finished his first story. At 15, he sold his first story to Famous Science Fiction. By 23, he was publishing frequent work. Greg would go on to write many novels and short stories, helping to define modern science fiction. Books like Killing Titan, and War Dogs, and Hull 03, and City at the End of Time, and of course Darwin's Radio, and Darwin's Children. He's won multiple awards, such as the Nebula Award, Hugo Awards. He's an illustrator. His artwork has appeared in Galaxy, Fantasy, and Science Fiction, Vertex. He does book covers, and he's the founding member of the ASFA, the Association of Science Fiction Artists. Now, this is interesting. In the wake of 9/11, he consulted with the U.S. Army and the State Department on biosecurity measures. In 2003, he was invited to speak on virology and evolution before the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia. Home for us. Bear has lectured around the world on literary, scientific, and technological subjects. In 2000, he lectured at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, on the nature and future of crime and criminal justice. He helped found the San Diego Comic-Con, and he's been a guest on The Daily Show. In 1983, he married Astrid Anderson. Their son Eric was born in September, and their second child was born in January 86-90. And Astrid herself has written for San Diego Noir. He can be reached through his website at www.gregbear, and there are startling supplements and visuals for City at the End of Time at www.cityattheendofTime.com. All these links will be on our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. Mr. Bear, how incredible to have you on the show. How are you?
Thank you. It's great fun. I'm glad to talk to you guys.
Thank you for being on the show, and thank you for coming on quickly. We sort of been running by the seat of our pants the last few weeks. Of guests have come on and come off, and we're using the time at home to write and to get the show going.
Yeah, I've been sitting down so much, the seat of my pants is getting threadbare, so I do need to exercise here.
Excellent.
I know what you mean. Have you been doing anything interesting or specific to keep busy during all this?
Nothing terribly interesting. I mean, we have been hunkered down and not doing a lot, but we have gotten out a fair amount. I think riding around in the car is okay. We dropped off a bunch of extra N95 masks to a local hospital yesterday. And we found a cache of left over from a sanding project wife was working on, Astrid was working on, and we donated them to the hospital, and they were glad to have them. I suspect there's a lot of resources that need to be delivered to the hospitals as soon as we can.
Right.
Absolutely. We usually start these interviews by asking our guests where it all began. Have you always wanted to be a writer? Like, what inspired you to write?
I think I wanted to be a writer from the time I saw my first Ray Harryhausen film in the Philippines in 1957. It scared the hell out of me. I had the emer come out of my wall of my bedroom that night. And after that, I said, hey, I got to do this to other people. This is just too cool. And so basically, I read EC Comics at the same time in the same years and a lot of other comic books, and I just kind of caught up on everything. And I started reading pretty regularly when I was 8 years old, when a neighbor gave me a copy of A Red Planet by Robert Heinlein. And boy, that totally knocked my socks off. And then when we were in Kodiak, stationed in Kodiak, the base library there had a fabulous science fiction section. But it took a few years for me to realize you could actually buy paperback books. My grandmother sent me some paperback books, and I was reading the Tom Swift books and stuff like that. But by the time we got back to San Diego and we're going up to L.A. regularly, I was a major paperback fan, and those were the golden days of paperbacks for me.
Can I interrupt you, sir? You're calling these books paperback? What are those? I get my books on a screen. Paper. Like from trees?
Even stranger. These are mass market paperbacks. So back in the day, even if you were just selling a few paperbacks, you were selling 100,000 of them.
Oh,
Greg, have you ever read? Because what you're talking about is making me think of this. Have you ever read or heard of? It's like a coffee table book called Paperbacks from Hell.
No, I haven't.
No,
it's by Grady Hendrix. You wrote Horror Story and things like that. I actually bought it. It's incredible. It basically delves into the history of horror paperbacks from the 70s to the 80s.
Yeah, I've got a lot of those.
Yeah, it's incredible. If you ever get a chance, check it out. It's really cool.
I bought my craft paperback in the late 1960s, and a friend of mine, David Clark, was the one who informed me that there were Arkham House books that had them in hardcover form. And so we would go to the Pickwick bookstores in Southern California and up in Los Angeles, and we would try and find all the Arkham House books that were still in print. And we got books that were 30 years old that were still in print. And now they're collector's items, of course, but we would buy them for cover price, which was about as much as we could afford back then.
Right.
Indeed. So the reading and the books you were getting inspired you to write your own.
Yeah, I thought, if I could get in a paperback, that'd be cool. If I get in a hardcover, that'd be even more cool. And by 1979, I actually was selling my first novels to publishers and ended up in paperback form. Yeah. And looked at cover art, all that kind of stuff, and suddenly realized, wait a minute, I think I'm actually a writer now.
Incredible. It's something I discovered was, you think you're going to get published for the first time, and then you're going to be the next Stephen King, and it's every time you make it to that next level, that's it, the ultimate level, I'm there, I'm going to be famous, then you look up, and there's, another level above you, beyond your sight, and just...
There's stuff we can aspire to and stuff we can, be proud of, and right now, I read Stephen King and still read Stephen King, and to my pride, he still reads me.
Ah, wonderful.
There's a lot of writers that that have been reading my books that inspired me when I was a kid. One of the early examples was in the 1980s at an ABA, American Booksellers Association meeting. Mm-hmm. I'm walking across the street with Robert Heinlein and Jenny Heinlein, and Mr. Heinlein looks at me and says, "You're Greg Bear? Great book. I like that book." And I realized he had read my latest novel.
Oh, my word.
And later on, we would work with those people and other folks. And the science fiction community is pretty tight-knit. But, a lot of writers that inspired the heck out of me have read my books, and that makes me incredibly proud.
I'm actually friends with a gentleman called, well, sort of associates called Hal Bolden out in California, and he spent some time in his youth with the great Truman Capote, and I've always wanted to reach out to Hal and ask about Truman, because Truman is one of my gods.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the authors that have influenced your work. Who were some of the authors that did influence your work growing up? Where can you say, I drew my style from this one and this one and this one?
Well, I can't say I draw my style from all of them, but in terms of subject matter, I have always vacillated between Sir Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury.
Wonderful.
And I've written stories that kind of mimic both of them. But the writers that inspired Arthur Clarke inspired me as well. A British writer named Olaf Stapledon, who wrote some of the most incredible books of all time in the 1930s and 40s. He wrote, The Star Maker and Last and First Men. And books.
Okay.
And they were so incredibly imaginative and just really formed up, but he didn't actually read a lot of science fiction. I think he read H.G. Wells, but then looking back to the horror side of things, we have the equivalents of people who also read H.G. Wells, like William Hope Hodgson. He had influence on me with House on the Borderland and a lot of other books. And when I was writing the City at the End of Time, I was directly inspired by his story, The Nightland, which is very, very brilliant, but also kind of difficult to read because of his style. So I wanted to kind of redo it a little bit and expand it outward. And that was a great chance for me to both pay attention to Arthur C. Clarke and to William Hope Hodgson and to Olaf Stapledon, but also to Jorge Luis Borges, who was one of my great influences, Argentinian author, who actually met in 1970 in San Diego. And after his lecture, he was blind at that point, but after his lecture, I walked up to him and boldly asked, "You've written about H.P. Lovecraft. What do you think of Mr. Lovecraft?" And he says, "Oh, Lovecraft," he says. "I haven't read much of his work, but what a fabulous name for a writer."
Nice.
Well, if you've read Borges, then you're really at the top of your form there. He was a literary master of the kind of the tweaked literary history and all that sort of stuff, alternate history. He was really brilliant.
So speaking of your mentors, I know that you actually had a correspondence with Ray Bradbury. What was that like? How did he change your life?
Well, we first met Ray in 1967 at a lecture he was giving. And David Clark and I, David and his mother, drove us out to the lecture. Jean Clark drove us out to the lecture, and we met Ray afterwards and been friends ever since. So I've known Ray up until he passed for 45 years. And what we would do is whenever we were in Los Angeles, we would get together for a lunch or a dinner, or if I was doing a signing in Los Angeles, he would come by the signing and sit next to me. And it was just a brilliant thing because A, we really liked each other. B, I was incredibly influenced by his stories and found him to be a literary master. And I think Ray is a prime example of one of the best influences you could have in your life, because his whole story, which I've told many times in lectures and passing on the stories, most recently at Comic Fest in San Diego, where we all talked about Ray, knowing him back in the 60s and 70s. His story idea for everybody was believe in yourself. Believe in what you love. If you're doing what you love, never give it up. And that was the prime thing he taught me. And also, don't be a snob. If you like reading Buck Rogers comics, keep reading them. Don't let your friends persuade you it's not right, And boy, if you're a science fiction writer and love science fiction, back in the 60s and 70s in particular, that was a hard time for people maintaining their dignity in terms of public pressure, because science fiction was nothing back then.
Yeah.
I'm loving, Phil, that he not only describes the authors, but he does their voices.
That's great.
You can tell he's doing the voices, and I'm digging it. It's like being with Ray Bradbury or being with Heinlein,
Very good.
He can do impressions too, right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, Fox, you're kind of doing an impression of a famous TV host right now.
Yeah, well, I've got to be famous somehow. I figure I'll just imitate them and fake it until I make it, as it were.
You could do a voiceover, and it will work perfectly. So
excellent.
We'll let your listeners figure out which host I'm referring to.
Definitely. But as I was saying earlier, Stoll and Wolfe Whiskey. We conjure spirits, and so do they. In Lancaster, PA. Thank you, Stoll and Wolfe.
Are you still drinking it over there?
Oh, I am sipping. This is...
Don't light it up. 100 proof is pretty dangerous.
Oh, well, at least we have something to burn if the heat goes out.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh, God, don't even say that.
We've got a distillery up here who is surviving by creating hand sanitizer, which they get from the side products of distilling whiskey. They've got this extra stuff that they can then package up, add a little scent and some gel, and they've got a hand sanitizer, and so they're providing that for the Seattle area right now.
Mr. Bear, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Alston and I have to rush now, buy as much of this whiskey as we can, so they can produce hand sanitizer.
Yeah, 100 proof is good enough for hand sanitizer, but 40 proof is not.
No, it's not. And the distillery right here in Lansdale, they're doing with every order, they're doing delivery and also pickup. With every order you get, they're giving you a free bottle of hand sanitizer with your order, which I think is great.
That's beautiful.
Just make sure to drink the right one.
Yeah, don't mix them up.
We will be right back with part 1 of our interview with Mr. Greg Bear on What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Parax Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com for more information about this episode and all of our previous episodes, plus our archive of ghost stories and material that you can't find on the show itself.
Rat, where are you going?
I'm going back to the Paranormal View, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Rat, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Rat, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
You gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Parax Radio Network.
And we're back talking to the amazing sci-fi author and one of my heroes, Mr. Greg Bear, author of Darwin'S Radio, on part 1 of our interview on What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show.
Greg, you wrote all through your adolescence and started having success in your early 20s. What changed in your writing that made you successful at that point?
Getting published, I think. My first novel took 4 years to sell, and it was a tough market back in the late 70s, but suddenly science fiction was taking off like a rocket about the same time that Star Wars was becoming hugely popular. And later I did some statistical analysis, and I found out that Star Wars was becoming hugely popular because a lot of science fiction books were being published in the mid-70s. And so you had all these people who liked to read science fiction and liked TV shows like Star Trek and so on. And when Star Wars came along, it was a pent-up demand, and they did such a beautiful job of it. So many people I knew worked on that movie, and they were teenagers who grew up with me back in the day. So it was just brilliant to watch that happen, and I love the film. But when it finally came and took off, suddenly science fiction was pretty big, and a lot of publishers were doing it. And a lot of authors were establishing themselves, like Stephen King and Dean Koontz, and they were becoming huge bestsellers. Peter Straub, et cetera. We could go down the list, of, you would know. What was going on was the audience was expanding. Certainly after World War II, a lot of GIs came back, and they had been reading the paperbacks that were delivered to them. Paperbacks, horror stories, science fiction collections, Lovecraft collections, etc. The period in which I discovered paperbacks was probably the best period in New York publishing history, And so they were selling millions and millions of books, but in 2000, that all came to a crashing halt. And I'm not sure why exactly, but it was long before Jeff Bezos started up the Kindle or anything like that.
Right.
It was in 2000 that suddenly the entire sales of publishing dropped off by 30%. And I think it might have had something to do with the loss of distributors and all that sort of stuff in the late 90s. So that's the history of publishing. But, fortunately, I got my chops in before that all started to change. And now what we've got are a lot of people who can self-publish and do a pretty good job that way. And a lot of my income comes from electronic books editions, which I knew were going to happen back in the early 90s. So I was predicting this and talking to my agent. My agent actually started up an ebook publisher called eReads. And now that's been full to Open Road, and Open Road is brilliant. They sell a lot of books. And if you're locked in your house, it's a good time to go over to buy electronic book editions for your e-reader. And I loved the e-readers. In fact, I think I've got like 1,000 books on my Kindle.
I'm loving my Kindle.
Wow.
You love yours, don't you, Phil?
I don't have a Kindle. I'm strictly physical copies.
Oh, I thought you at least had a digital screen first, because I love my Kindle.
No.
I just can't carry the books with me everywhere.
I have a bookshelf just stocked with all I collect books. I don't get when I read them, I'll lend them out, but I usually like them back because I like to store them, and I'm proud of my collection. I don't think I own a single. Well, I may own one or two like digital books. But
I knew some film directors who really wanted to have 35 millimeter or bigger copies. And of course, we worked with Paul Allen to start the Science Fiction and the Horror Museum up here in Seattle. And he had the 70 millimeter camera at his Cinerama projection system. And, there's hardly anything you can get better than a 70 millimeter film strip. So I used to love that stuff. But Ray Bradbury didn't want to sell electronic editions. He always believed in the physical book. And unfortunately, I was never smart enough to tell him, Ray, an electronic book is sent through the air. It's like the end of Fahrenheit 451. For all these people are reading these books. There's millions of books being sent through the air in spiritual form, and you got to love that, and I still do.
Incredible.
Absolutely.
It is the introduction of e-publishing that really gave me my career. I remember when I started, I was trying to get out as many stories as I could, and back then you had to print the story, you had to print the cover letter, you had to prepare it, it had to look pristine, you had to have the SASE. It would take me half a morning just to get a story out. And now through digital publishing and all that, it's been a lot easier to build a career. In fact, now this is something I want to talk about. I wanted to interject this real quick. I've had an experience that a lot of our listeners, I think, would appreciate some of the wisdom that I took from it. Now, as Phil knows, Mercy, my horror hospital thriller, where I took my experiences battling cancer, the bone marrow extraction, the chemotherapy, the time in the hospitals, and the pain that I suffered, I took all that and I turned it into a metaphor for a horror novel. And I released it through Bloodbound Books, and recently it was, released over at BookBub as one of their featured books, and I got like 20,000 downloads, and we're waiting for the...
That's pretty good.
Yeah, we're waiting for the reviews to come in. That was really why we did it. We need the reviews. And unfortunately, the people who don't like your book and couldn't read it, didn't understand it, they review first.
Often we get that, I want to be first online with a bad review.
Yeah, and it seems to be they run in, so I've seen a couple of nasty troll-like reviews, and several good ones, several 5-star. I've got plenty more good than I do bad, but for some reason I fixated on the bad ones. And Phil, remember, I was kind of upset the other night because I got a really awful troll. Who?
Yeah, you did. And actually, I looked her up. And she seems to bash everything she reviews for the most part. I don't know if you looked at that, but
my wife did too. Allison did too.
Most everything that she reviews is a problem with it, or she hates it, or it's this, or it's that. Very cynical.
And I got it. It's because she didn't understand it, and she figured the fault was mine. And really, Mercy. Like the Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, they're esoteric books about my battle with cancer. You have to work hard to get to understand these books. They're not just traditional thrillers. And I was questioning myself, well, maybe I should change my writing style. Maybe I should be dumbing down my books even. Maybe I should not be writing so deeply and with such passion about stuff, this painful stuff. And then I thought to myself, do I want to be a writer that invokes and provokes, or do I want to be a benign author?
Right. You got to stay true. You got to stay true to yourself.
What you want to be is an author who doesn't go searching on the internet for all the reactions you could possibly find.
You got it.
Sales figures. If you spend too much time at that, you're not writing, and B, you're going to be feeling bad a lot of the time. So my advice as an older writer, and I am an older writer, I'm in that danger group now for our plague that's coming down. That is basically something you just don't want to do.
Right.
You want to stick with the people who support you and pay no attention to the idiots who don't.
And it's a difficult book to understand. It's very esoteric. It's metaphysical. I bring in a lot of shaman concepts into it that wouldn't really be well known today. And so I calmed down, and I just felt so much better. And I thought to myself, well, good or bad, it had a response, and I just should stop paying attention at this point.
Absolutely. You're now going to... Here's my quote. You're the Mircea Eliade of the horror set.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
You're the Mircea Eliade of the horror set.
Well, I'm going to find out who that is, and I'm going to be really happy.
You can go look him up because he's an amazing writer on shamanism.
Oh, yes,
Mircea Eliade. Mircealealiade. So
kind of like Carlos Castaneda, or...
Well, yeah, but he actually made a lot of money off of it, and he did a great job, but he was faking it.
Right. And I've often wondered if maybe that's what I should be doing. Well, but anyways, getting back to Mr. Bear and this wonderful conversation we're having, and I'm really enjoying this on episode 139, where What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Parax Radio Friday nights, and check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, where I intend to get information about all the authors he's talking about so that our readers can find these new authors that are probably going to get buried by dust and time and popularity, and they can click a link and find their work. Okay, so, Mr. Barron, I can definitely ask you this, and I know you're going to know the answer. A lot of other authors are getting there, or I wouldn't trust their answers, but you, sir, I know you're going to know the answer in this. What is the secret to writing quality science fiction?
Well, you got to understand the subject matter, so that means you got a lot of reading to catch up on. You got to interview scientists. You got to listen to the way they talk and the words they're using and understand them. Scientists are your workers, your movers and shakers in science fiction. And there's some brilliant writers out there who write books who are really good to read. Not just nonfiction like what Arthur C. Clarke wrote, but Carl Sagan, and nowadays there's just so many writers. Back in the 60s and 70s, I read up a lot on black holes and singularities, and almost without doing the math, suddenly I became a semi-expert on them, and that was just brilliant. And then in the 70s, I started reading about biology, and ended up with Blood Music and eventually Darwin's Radio. And the more books you read, the better you are at the subject matter. But you can't necessarily be ignorant of the subject matter. Now, people have often accused Ray Bradbury of not being a scientist. Well, he wasn't. But what he did do was he kind of kept in touch with a lot of scientists, and he invented a lot of stuff from this that no other science fiction writer came up with. Ray Bradbury was the first to write about virtual reality. Mm-hmm. And so it's just really interesting to look at what science fiction writers have done and what their influences were. Ray was very cognizant of science, but he didn't follow it deeply. He was a metaphorist. And so you don't need to be a total scientist to write science fiction, but it doesn't hurt.
That's true.
Excellent.
That's very true. That's very true. And you advise the U.S. State Department and U.S. military on biosecurity measures. Do you think or let me rephrase that.
You want to redo that?
Do we? Yeah, I'll redo that. So you advise the U.S. State Department and U.S. military on biosecurity measures. Do we have you to thank for that chip you're implanting in our heads now? and what?
I've certainly written about it, but that was back in the 1980s. No, that chip is all somebody else's responsibility. And the only thing that worries me is I think it's badly programmed.
Oh dear.
What other wild topics did you discuss?
My sense of balance is worse than it used to be, and I think that's because as a replicant, I'm just not that well made.
I'm sorry to hear that. But yeah, what other kind of wild topics did you discuss?
Well, we were talking about all sorts of things in terms of what was possible at the time and what might present a threat. And so we were trying to do threat analysis and also to help the people in Homeland Security figure out how to make things better. So one of the ideas I pitched under force, trying to get into USA Today, which we ended up doing, I says, let's put a chip in a dog's brain so we learn how it smells, and then take those patterns and use them for creating better smelling sensors and so on. And I don't think they actually did that. But right now, there's all this technology that involves smell and sight and voice recognition and so on, which wasn't around at the time period, which would be the 1990s, early 1990s. And, that stuff is really advancing. But what's kind of sad is these people, the Science and Technology Division of Homeland Security, are now overshadowed by the political crap that's going on in the rest of the country. So these people are working very, very hard to keep us safe, and yet they're not being given support at the highest levels.
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah, they should really be applauded.
And both. Applauded and supported.
Applauded and supported.
Applauded and supported.
Yes. Just like I applaud and support Fox's drinking over there right now.
I was about to say, I applaud and support the good people at Stoll and Wolfe Distillery in Lidditz, PA. Wow, this stuff... Allison just texted me. I was pouring myself a glass, and she said, it's 3 o'clock. What are you doing pouring yourself a glass of whiskey? And I said, well, the sun's over the yard arm, because I'm a pretentious porcupine. And she said, well...
Weak sunlight, yes.
You got to pour me one, then. I said, okay. So she just texted me a minute ago. I guess she's out there working from home. She works for an accounting firm here. And she said, I think you just gave me a glass of Coke. It's that amazing. It tastes that good. And Phil, I'm definitely going to send you one of these on your birthday because Stoll and Wolfe Distillery, the spirits taste just like Coke. They taste so good, your wife is thinking you are bogarting all the liquor, and it'll probably cause a divorce. But it's worth it, because you will get all the Stoll and Wolfe. Find them in Lidditz, PA. In fact, they're probably still delivering liquor at this time of harsh time when we really needed the whiskey. They do vodka. It's very expensive stuff, but it's incredible at Stoll and Wolfe. Anyway, they're going to be... I don't know if they're going to be happy with me for this anyway. Okay, so we're talking...
I think they will.
I think so, too. We're talking to Greg Bear on episode 121. We're talking to Greg Bear on episode... You can tell I've had some whiskey. We're talking to Greg...
I'm drinking coffee.
Coffee. Boo. Coffee all morning. Episode 139. Greg Bear. Darwin's author. God, I loved Darwin's Radio, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so during the end of the 20th century, you served on the Citizens Advisory Council on National Space Policy, a private group organized by Jerry Parnell, James Ransom, and the great Larry Niven. It consisted of scientists, military specialists, space scientists, and engineers, astronauts, and writers. This group contributed substantially to the end of the Cold War and advised NASA on the future of commercial space. So, how did you contribute to the end of the Cold War and our exploration of commercial space?
Well, it's probably still a little controversial, but, what was happening was General Danny Graham had an idea which he was promoting to space scientists like Max Hunter and so on, who were real experts on all of this stuff. And his idea was, pretty soon nuclear weapons are going to be on instant call before any leader can be involved. and that's letting the machinery run the asylum here. And so they says, okay, we have to have a defense against that. And so they want to build anti-ballistic missile systems to knock down possible accidental things at the very least. And that was very controversial at the time. But I think what it ultimately ended up doing was it ended up, to Gorbachev at least in the last years of the Soviet Union, hugely expensive to counter that measure. They were already spending some huge percentage of their gross national product on military and security. And suddenly they were facing a new Cold War, a defensive Cold War. And so that was not only controversial, but it could be extremely expensive. And I think that plus Chernobyl and a lot of other stuff kind of contributed to the atmosphere in the Soviet Union. That is, they just could not continue with this kind of expenditures. And so eventually, by 1989, 1990, they folded up and went home. And the Soviet Union came to an end. And that was a pretty amazing period of time and really hard on Russia. And the psychology is still being felt now. But you know, the fact was that things were reaching a real crisis point, which certainly people like Jerry and Larry and Denny Graham and Max Hunter and Robert Heinlein and a lot of other folks realized was going to happen. So what we did in the late 90s was we converted it over, because Jerry had lost a fair amount of clout in the Reagan administration, and he only reacquired some of it when George H.W. Bush came along. And suddenly he realized, we have to turn this into co-venturing to get people up in space to allow space business to develop. So that's what they were doing at the end there. And they actually had Dan Golden, the director of NASA, come out for a 9-hour session with our group to try and figure out how to clear the way for commercial space ventures to get going without NASA standing in the way. And that was a pretty important thing, too. That was, I think, more important than what the previous thing was. And now we see commercial space really helping NASA stay in position.
Excellent. That's wonderful. You know who's going to love this? Phil, our friend Bill.
Oh, yeah.
He's just going to freak out, talking about this, because he loves this kind of stuff. And I love how these groups have had the imagination to not only include scientists and strategists and generals and military historians, but also the folks with imagination, the creative types. It makes me think of Churchill's magic shop back in World War II, like magicians like Jasper Mescaline. And, they were trying to figure out how to stop the Germans and the Italians from bombing the Suez Canal and the city there. So what they did was they turned off all the lights in the city, and then they built a mock-up city a couple of miles away along the coast and lit it up. And so when the Germans were flying on their Fokkers and their bombers, they thought that was the city, and they would bomb it and go home, and the Suez Canal was safe. But I love hearing about this kind of imagination and how it was used for creating peace. And really, if I could, I would buy all the ladies and gentlemen in that room some Stoll and Wolfe Whiskey.
Some would appreciate it. Jerry stopped drinking in the last years of his life, but his brilliance was he thought, science fiction writers know how to explain difficult subjects simply, so we'll bring them in to help talk to the politicians. The scientists know how to, get things right and put ideas together, but to express them, we need writers who have done this regularly, and so he did. He had a fair number of us out there, and that was very, very brilliant and very interesting. And I learned so much. That was what contributed to my technical knowledge for books like Eon and later even for the government side of Darwin's Radio. Is just suddenly I was meeting the politicians, some of them anyway, and meeting some of the people in charge of major programs, and I realized, my gosh, I think I have an insight into how they think, and that was brilliant for me.
Incredible.
Wow. That is incredible.
And this was part 1 of our interview with Mr. Greg Bear. Greg will be back on our next episode, so stay tuned on What Are You Afraid Of? Paperback? What are those? I get my books on a screen. T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A television series based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology Points of Origin from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time. Find out more information at www.tfoxdunham.com.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into 2 feature films, False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon Prime on demand. His screenplay, 3 Tunnels, was a semi-finalist at the LA Screenplay Competition. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. He formerly held the position of Senior Marketing Manager at Eternal Press, and was a journalist for Patch, where he wrote a daily tech column covering the latest electronics and gadgets. He lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and is currently working on his second novel, Worst Afterlife Ever.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.